Why? Because they have things nobody else has, because they can afford it, because frankly, I'm rich enough to do whatever the fuck I want, and you're poor enough not to ask me any goddamn stupid questions. Now, I mean that as a friend.
The abhorrent personality of Devin Weston can easily be summed up with this cutscene alone, hiring Michael, Trevor, and Franklin to, as he says, have them rob his friends of things others don't have so he can turn around and sell the stolen goods. In this case, extremely expensive supercars at an inflated price for those willing to pay for it. Recruiting expert thieves to quietly steal from his so-called friends is bad enough, showing the cutthroat and selfish nature of Devin. It's then his comments of being so rich to do whatever he wants and Franklin being just poor enough to not ask him any stupid questions that pushes the entire psyche and overall dynamic into an entirely different field. We're no longer just preying on others for our own personal gain, but now recruiting what we perceive as expendable assets that he believes will fall into line, because when it came to everyone else he deals with, all of the people that were at the very least personally willing to smile and laugh in his face, playing the same friendly facade he appears to play with them, they bow, bend the knee, and submit to whatever Devin's will is. Money in their world talks, it communicates power, and to him, it thus signals dominion. But as we know from Michael's actions with what happens at the movie studio, to Trevor's move to both letting Mr. K go and eventually raiding and kidnapping Devin, after Franklin rejected his offer of working with him to kill Michael, Devin learns not only the hard way but way too late in life that money can't always bully, threaten, or force someone to your side. Eventually, you will meet someone who frankly doesn't care or simply just doesn't live in the same world he does. In a world of crooks, everyone is rotten. The only difference between those at the top like Devin and those at the supposed bottom like Trevor, Michael, and Franklin wasn't money. It was living this lie of vanity bestowed upon them through society. When you're at the bottom, whether you do or don't have cash, you care less about what others think, both in terms of you and the things you get into. Today we're going to be diving into Devin's background, his actions, his psyche, and most importantly, the incredible influence he wields within the Grand Theft Auto universe. Because while he may seem like a self-centered idiot who threw his own private militia at Michael just to settle a simple score, the truth of the matter is he is a billionaire, and as such he really does have a major say over everything that happens in this world, for better and for worse.
Put you in touch.
No, I don't want just some dude. I want you. I want your crew. I want pros on this. I guess I just got you figured wrong, man.
Hey, what's the figure?
Tell me something. You like football? I got a stake in a sports investment venture. You like the market? I got some funds you can manage. Name your poison, man.
Normally, I do start these character videos based on childhoods and begin from there. But due to us not really having much information about his early life and the fact that the only source we do have, with the minuscule amounts of information it comes with, is courtesy of his own website, Devin Weston, which is set up to explain everything about Devin as per his own words. Consequently, as one could expect, it's filled with his own personal appraisal, and really ultimately leads nowhere. That's probably filled with a bunch of lies. Short version is he claims to be a quote-unquote teacher that has made his first million at 23 years old, only a year out of college. The college in question is identified as Theater and Musical Therapy from San Andreas Community College, where he supposedly graduated with great honor without ever attending a single lecture. Really, the main thing to pull out of all of that is that he attended San Andreas Community College with some kind of intention of entering creative arts therapies or expressive arts therapies, which could give us a little bit of insight into the more eccentric part of Devin's personality. Really, the website's own wording and descriptions of him are revealing in a different way. It almost frames him as someone who never had to struggle, a man who was handed everything and never learned how to really properly attain anything himself. In the game, he already comes off with a strong sense of entitlement, but it's his own About Devin Weston section that pushes it all into absurdity. He talks about making $1 million like it means nothing, casually mentioning how he used to buy $250,000 cars just to crash them for fun. He claims he has bought and deliberately bankrupted more companies than he's had hot dinners. He even says he revolutionized the hedge fund industry in the early 2000s by refusing to hedge at all, and that he intentionally crashed the market in 2007, while the official story blamed a mortgage crisis behind that crash. Supposedly, it was to keep what he had done hidden from the public. On one level, it's clearly Rockstar taking a jab at people who are so wealthy and so self-absorbed that their own narratives become absurd, and thus reading it can easily make you laugh. But at the same time, the game has moments where it takes itself seriously enough that you start to question where these claims are really coming from. It opens the door to looking at whether these are just exaggerated boasts or if they're reflecting something more intentional in how his character is actually written. With no real background to latch onto, it then makes it all feel like there's no substance here apart from his official titles, his own employees, and his companies, which then bleeds into this feeling of Devon being nothing. He exists for the money, inherited hobbies and habits that probably weren't his, became obsessed with them as such because that's all he ever knew, and thought that drive would push him more and perhaps even have other people gravitate to him more. Of course, there's more to him. We know he can be quite emotional, and so it's not all calculated business or as if he's so one-noted that he's just purely about the money and just that. I'm just saying the lack of any real information, his website as supplemental evidence to his own actions and personality within the game, all betrays an insecure billionaire with an identity problem. But speaking of his company, let's take a look at Devin Weston Holdings. The 4 official employees, their official titles, what they do for the company, and the company's overall reach, because damn is it massive. First is Devin Weston, Chairman, President, and CEO of Devin Weston Holdings. Next is Senior Vice President and General Counsel Molly Schultz, who also serves as Devin's lawyer and head of the legal team. After the two at the top is then Ray Slim Navarro, Chief Investment Officer, and finally George Rucker, Head of Research. Now, the last two we don't really see in-game apart from the portraits put up on Devin's website, but their description along with Molly's all paints a picture of a team of 3 people underneath Devin who can continue to run Devin's business, an alpha fund, which we'll get into in a second, an expert in legal proceedings to help circumvent laws, or beat any lawsuits thrown their way, and actively look through multiple industries to weed out any companies Devin and his team can either fully, forcibly take over or slowly gain some kind of foothold within the organization, slowly take it over, bankrupt it, or just abuse it for his own purpose. Now, let's begin with Molly, because if it wasn't for her death at the hands of, well, an unfortunate airport accident, anything that happened to Devin later on would have been a major problem, all thanks to Molly, as she graduated from Vespucci University. While it's named after the beach out here in Los Santos, the school is actually located in Liberty City and can be somewhat explored in Grand Theft Auto 4. From Vespucci University, she'd acquire her degree in law, and later continue her education receiving her Master of Science in Corporate Rating from the University of San Andreas out in Los Santos. Now, fun side note, a Dr. Isaiah Friedlander graduated from the University of San Andreas with a bachelor's degree in 1984. But that's beside the point. For Molly, her receiving her MSc, or Master of Science degree in corporate rating is quite substantial. Corporate rating isn't a standalone practice, it's more so a continuation of her law degree, but with a stronger understanding of how to identify struggling or undervalued companies. Buying a large stake or shares within the company to gain voting rights in order to force significant changes, regardless of opposition raised by that company's current management. This then allows the investor, which in this case Devin, after Molly has identified a company and bought significant shares, to begin a hostile takeover, strip the company of its assets, which can work by selling off specific valuable divisions or real estate, which is important, for short-term profit or overall restructuring the entire company, replacing top executives and putting other key members in position that otherwise would have never obtained those positions without buying such massive shares to begin with. Upon her graduation from the University of San Andreas, Molly trained at the law firm Feist & Welch LLP. She then spent 5 years as part of Globe Oil's in-house litigation team before moving to Redwood Cigarettes, where she then successfully overturned 26 class action lawsuits linking tobacco to lung cancer. It's thanks to her undoubtable success with these 26 cases that most likely gained a significant amount of news coverage that would lead Devin to go out and meet her at a so-called resistance training and Rwanda benefit workout in 2009. The next significant member is George Rucker, the head of research. Based off his description, what he does sounds to go hand in hand with Molly's responsibilities. He once served in the military, in charge of strategic drone strikes. Apparently, his experience in working on secret government projects evolved into developing a gift in identifying weak spots, swooping in and surgically annihilating everyone while making a nice profit, no matter the collateral damage. His military background seems to transition well into business as he serves as the one person to sniff out floundering companies with weak management, loose union ties, and a workforce that can easily be kicked to the curb. Head of research and name as far as preemptive intelligence gathering goes, but really George's job is to find struggling and weak companies, zero in on weak unions, weak management, and those who can easily be fired. And then there's Ray Navarro, Chief Investment Officer. Ultimately, Ray is two things. One, it's Devon basically making another person just like him. He's the first person Devon ever mentored. And it's stated that the two of them spend quite a lot of time together playing racquetball, with Ray rumored to suck up by intentionally losing to his mentor. But more importantly is Ray isn't afraid of hurting investors. As per his own testimony, he credits Devon from saving him from a life behind bars back in 2008 when he was accused of selling mortgage-backed securities to elderly investors, then shorting those same deals for massive profit before they inevitably defaulted. The post makes it clear that he was never found guilty of such accusations, although interestingly, if we double back to Devon's own About section here, mentioning his claim of being responsible for the 2008 crisis, what Ray did could have been seen as something admirable and highly valued in Devon's eyes, taking advantage of the old and naive for his own personal gain. So with these four, you have Devin Weston Holdings, with Devon at the top, George, who identifies opportunities within the market, Ray figuring out how to squeeze the most profit out of them, and then Molly ensuring the company survives any legal consequences from all of their endeavors. Lastly is Weston's Alpha Fund, which ties directly into all of his companies. Now, Weston's fund is nothing more than a mockery and fraudulent system. We don't really need to look any further than Ray's About section that details if it wasn't for his well-deserved bonus, the Weston Alpha Fund would have been the top-performing investment in the world last year. That does a lot in adding to Ray's corrupt nature, but then bridges us perfectly to the Alpha Fund. In short, it's a mockery of a hedge fund. It's domiciled in the British Virgin Islands, which is a joke in of itself, as the British Virgin Islands are notorious for offshore corporations, tax avoidance, shell companies, and just all-around intentionally making it harder to reach the many millions of dollars being trafficked there. And this entire fund is inverted all round. None of Devon's investments are actually put towards any profitable causes. Instead, it's him betting on instability. As a quick example, you have healthcare default swaps. That's an insurance policy against a healthcare company. If healthcare gets worse, which Devon is basically counting on it, then he profits. Next is an initiative known as fracking forwards. Fracking is basically a hydraulic fracturing where a well simulation technique is used to extract crude oil and natural gases from deep underground rock formations. It can be controversial because it forces communities and policymakers to weigh out immediate economic benefits against severe environmental and public health risks, such as contaminating groundwater and introducing pollution to the environment just in general. Asbestos repos is quite funny in of itself as well. We all know how toxic asbestos is and how closely it's tied to decades of serious health issues, especially within the construction industry. The joke Rockstar is making here is that Devon has somehow managed to take one of the most dangerous materials in modern history and turn it into just another simple investment opportunity. Then you have the Republic of Congo currency contracts, where Devon is essentially betting on the value of a country's currency despite its political and economic instability. There's no investment in growth or any long-term success for the nation. He's positioning himself to profit from the uncertainty surrounding it. It's inevitable collapse, most likely. Now, you can go through every single investment listed and break them down one by one, but they all lead to the same underlying idea. Devon is not creating anything or building value in any traditional way. Instead, he's consistently finding ways to profit from instability, controversy, and situations that are already just meant to fall apart. And that becomes more obvious when you look at how he pitches these opportunities to his investors. He advertises an average annual return of 73% gross and 18% net, which sounds impressive until you actually look at those details hidden within the fine print. He says he's going to be taking 73% of the profits for himself, then adding an additional flat fee of 10% on top of that. When everything is accounted for, investors are ultimately left with only 17%. And the way he reassures them is by addressing the imbalance or explaining the restructure in any meaningful way. Instead, he simply tells them, don't worry, you're still going to end up insanely rich. Then he recircles back to the asbestos repos, as if that alone is enough to justify everything and has somehow become the clearest representation of how he approaches business. Or maybe that's him just leveraging yet another thing that he sees in the distance. When you look at Devin Weston Holdings, It has a hand in damn near everything. Merryweather Security Consulting is of course at the top of that list because it's the most significant and most prominent within the story and within GTA Online, but when you look at this list, he owns companies that are seen multiple times within the Grand Theft Auto universe. For brands expanding from GTA 4 in Liberty City to Los Santos here in Grand Theft Auto 5, there's the Italian restaurant Al Dente's, to the drug Mollis, most known for being Grand Theft Auto's version of Viagra. Then there's Banner Hotel and Spa, which has a presence in both Liberty City and multiple locations within, right here in Los Santos. Good Aids Pharmacy, Save a Cents Grocery Store, Vanilla Unicorn Strip Club, Patriotic Beer, Dynasty 8, which is real estate, Fart Gasoline Company, which has a big presence in Grand Theft Auto 4, Skiver Construction Corporation, which is actually in charge of the construction site on the Union Depository. They're the ones you get the driller from. Their warehouse in Grapeseed is used by Merryweather because of Devon's ownership, or at least partial ownership of both. Los Santos Department of Nuclear Power, the Corkers baseball team, Debonair Cigarettes, No-Go Vodka, Oranger Tang Soft Drink, Pump and Run Gymnasium, San Andres Lotto, multiple clothing and shoe brands, and of course Richard's Majestic Productions. I did leave out a few, but it just goes to show. Devon has influence over many different aspects of life and business. Merryweather's private militia, municipalities via Los Santos' nuclear power division, its lottery system, real estate that most likely spans across the entire nation, and everything from entertainment to alcohol and pharmaceuticals. It's actually quite surprising to not find him have any hands in terms of any news outlets like Weasel News or any other substantial piece of media coverage that isn't entertainment, because you would think you would want to be able to control the narrative, but then again, if you have friends in the FIB such as Steve Haynes, I suppose you may feel you already have all of your bases covered. So when you zoom out and look at the much larger, grander picture, you have health, wellness, physical fitness, real estate, power, entertainment, pharmaceuticals. He has some level of involvement in nearly every part of daily life. Well, we can easily cycle back to Molly and the rest of Devon's team to reemphasize how ironclad Devon may feel. The more significant thing to draw attention to here is what it all says about the ultra-rich. Someone like Devon who comes across as out of touch, lacking common sense, or overly self-assured to the point where you question just how he managed to get so far in life as he has, there's often more complexity behind them than is immediately visible. His portfolio is massive, but thankfully a major character flaw of his vanity or sense of being superior and having to make a show of it, undercuts his very own strengths and would ultimately lead to his own downfall. A downfall both Steve Haynes and his greatest assets, Merryweather, plays a part in.
You see his face that last time I popped it. Boom! Steve, what a pleasure, bro. Oh!
Devin Weston is a very good friend of mine, so why don't you watch your tongue?
It's not a coincidence the first time we were introduced to Devon is through Steve Haynes, hiring Michael and Trevor to torture Ferdinand Karamov, or more commonly referred to as Mr. K in their war on terror. Now, we've already covered Steve and Agent ULP before, so if you want more information on Steve Haynes or the IAA's greater war on terror, I invite you to check both those videos out. Instead, here we're focusing on the relationship between Steve Haynes and Devin Weston, two men outside of legal boundaries, both believing they are untouchable due to their position, status, and overall protection they believe that they have. From our introduction to Weston at the abandoned warehouse, we can make a well-educated guess that Steve practically lets Devin do whatever he wants. In this case, torturing Mr. K for nothing more than their shared amusements. Or perhaps there's more business there to be conducted here. Devin's next appearance after interrogating Mr. K is when Michael steals government bonds destined for the IAA so they can instead go to the FIB. It's a part of Steve's grand fight over government funding, since Steve is all about being seen as the good guy. He requires the government bonds and proper funding for his organization over the IAA he hates so much, and you would think that they really didn't need Weston's help here. Theoretically speaking, if everyone got wind the Group 6 truck was hit, and those who were better informed on the ongoing power struggle between the IAA and FIB, it would make sense that certain people within the FIB, particularly Steve, Dave, or anyone else that is publicly oppositional towards the IAA, would fall under any suspicion. So if they needed someone to launder the bonds and sell it off without a trace, they could have easily utilized Lester. That's someone that does seem to fall within his wheelhouse quite well, and that's assuming if they were willing to force another one of Michael's associates to work for their own benefits. Considering Lester was practically wheelchair-bound and less confrontational than the rest of Michael's companions, it would make more sense for them to be more willing to recruit Lester, or perhaps it had nothing to do with Lester at all and all about Devon, who stood to benefit from it. Weston Alpha Fund is already established and practically untouchable. The role Devon most likely played here is after receiving the government bonds, he then puts them into his Weston Alpha Fund, where they're quietly sold or transferred through entities under his control. The proceeds then become difficult to trace because they're moving through offshore companies, complex transactions, or investment vehicles, all under the Devin Weston brand. Devin would take his cut, and Steve would receive his funding through overall secrecy or some kind of public contribution. Now, that would be plausible if it wasn't for Steve's constant complaints that he needs more money. Steve later requires more money to hit the inhumane labs, which leads to the robbery of the Blaine County Savings Bank, essentially putting the whole financial backing of everything on Michael, Trevor, and Franklin. If we look at it as Steve strictly hiring these three to help him carry out this war against the IAA, then it's nothing more than Steve Haynes provoking a war against another government agency, claiming it's for the greater good, with the funds being put to better use with them over the other. However, if you incorporate Devon and Merriweather into the picture, it all looks quite differently. Now, real quickly, remember, on the one hand, Steve is actually operating outside of the greater FIB. Later admitting his own organization is looking into him, scoffing at the reality he's then forced to deal with, in terms of his own illegal activities and the thin excuses that he's been giving for such heinous actions. Devon had no clue who Michael or Trevor was until, as he says, he sees it fit for that to change, which just so happened to be after the so-called robbery of government funds. The job was successful, and all of a sudden he claims he wants pros on a high score he has in mind, the 5 luxurious cars that he wants stolen. Intentionally or completely accidentally, Steve has found a sketchy, albeit a professional crew for Devon's own personal use. Or maybe it was a test from the beginning for Devon all along. And the reason I say that may be possible is because let's look at the Inhumane Labs raid. According to Steve, the IAA is developing a chemical weapon, a nerve gas, that they apparently are developing with plans to allow a so-called major terrorist to release within a metropolitan area. The intent of it is thus allowing the government to continue its funding in its ever-growing war against terror. Now, after the Agent ULP video, I gotta say such a claim sounds to be ludicrous. The IAA, at least in 2008, and by the way Mr. K was being treated here in 2013, Los Santos, is all about discrimination. While true, it does kill in an effort to counter-influence individuals with certain backgrounds that may or may not have ties to legitimate terroristic organizations, its biggest crimes are more tied to hiring people like Nico that can be taken advantage of and used to carry out precise kills to consolidate the IAA's own power. Keep out anyone that may undermine it, and then control the newspapers claiming that witnesses that saw such killings happen are all baseless. They have no idea what they're talking about. The IAA is its own corrupt entity. I'm not saying it's blameless by any means, just to claim it's allowing to do anything in the name of boosting funding is counterintuitive to, as it says, catching anti-American activity. The idea of a nerve agent being developed here is, I believe, to be quite true. Just it's not the IAA behind it, but instead Merriweather and Merriweather alone, or potentially working with another unnamed organization. A few years before 2013, the facility was leased to Merriweather, which is primarily ran by Donald or Don Percival. Since moving into the facility, the belief is that biological weapons have been developed here. Steve claims it was all for the IAA, but it's later refuted by Agent 14 that Merriweather was never contracted by the IAA. The IAA later goes on to confiscate railguns developed at Inhumane Labs, and since we do see Agent ULP right on top of Steve following the aftermath of the raid on the Inhumane Labs, and he's surrounded by military personnel, it does lead to a few questions that I want to clear up. First, just because Inhumane Labs was leased to Merriweather doesn't mean the entire facility was automatically under Merriweather's control. Rather, it could mean that they had the ability to develop and experiment on particular research within some departments, but the whole facility itself might have still been considered strategically important, and hence the military's presence has nothing to do with the IAA itself, but rather it was the military protecting a government asset. So even if Merriweather leased part of the facility or was conducting research there, the installation itself is still tied to national security. If classified weapons, biological research, or experimental technology was present, a military response makes sense regardless of whether the IAA is directly involved or not. So why was Agent ULP there? Well, I think the IAA was beginning to seriously investigate what exactly Merryweather was getting up to within the Inhumane Labs research facility. Apart from the building being tied to national security, let's look at the organization as a whole. Merryweather's approval to operate on U.S. soil was recently cleared, and it seems as of its official approval, its operations and overall dealings within Los Santos has expanded greatly, grabbing the attention of none other than Trevor Phillips to steal whatever Merryweather was guarding within the harbors of Los Santos, which was a freighter that contained a highly experimental superweapon as per Lester's explanation. Lester also claims stealing such a weapon and intending to sell it to the Chinese would garner the attention of Merryweather, the FIB, IAA, and damn near every government agency you can think of. That weapon was placed back, resulting in Weasel News, which may or may not be influenced by the IAA or FIB, as we've seen in the ULP video, would go on to report that nothing was stolen and so no foul play was suspected in the incident despite multiple explosions and gunshots being reported by various witnesses. The Daily Globe newspaper would also report the container ship being sunk wouldn't be the best way for the CEO, Don Percival, to celebrate his company getting its recent approval by Congress to expand on U.S. soil. It then shares Merryweather has accepted contracts operating as a high-value courier service and running a special security detail within the port, which would have taken some major hits following Trevor's raid. The news reports would serve as both a way to contain public panic and buy some cover to do some kind of internal investigations of what was going on, which from the perspective of the IEA, when you have such a big event take place in the harbor, and remember that that same company is operating to the north in a secluded area where biological and experimental tech is being developed, it starts to make sense as to why they started looking deeper into Merryweather. I also want to point out here that Devin Weston has no reservations on working with the Chinese. Again, stealing those supercars, he even mentions that he planned on selling them to wealthy communist Chinese that were willing to pay even more for those vehicles. It stands to reason then that Weston may have asked a favor or put Steve up to the raid under the guise of it dealing a major blow to the IAA. In truth, it was really meant to wipe any incriminating evidence Merryweather may have, thus using Steve's own hatred towards his political enemy and having Michael and his associates carry the raid out, keeping Devon from the mess that would have came out of it, especially if it was well known that he was an associate of Steve's. It should have also kept Steve out of it as well, but since he was forced to go along on the raid due to not enough manpower showing up, and him ultimately sacrificing himself to buy everyone else some time, it creates a deeper sense of doubt on the whole idea of a war against funding as Haynes was pushing it all out to be, and more so being used by Devon to help clear up any negative press, public backlash, or sanctions on US soil due to the type of work and negative perception they may have been garnering. Weston using Steve is actually quite plausible too. I mean, the sheer emotion behind Steve's words when he speaks to the IEA really does appear to originate from a place of passion, and not just him repeating whatever he thinks will get everyone to go along with what he requires out of them and ask as little questions as possible. We also do have evidence of Devon using people to further his own gains and dangle whatever they want in front of that person to stop them from asking questions and just perform. The entire vehicle robbery is just that, but it's most prominent of which with Michael.
It's over, Michael.
You done good, kid. You kept this bullshit up long enough to help me trigger a fantastic insurance payout when the plug is pulled. I love you. You're like my spirit brother now.
Molly mentions to Franklin the money he was expecting to get paid by Devon for securing the cars will be invested within Devon's Alpha Fund. Franklin knew what I just proved here. That's a polite way of saying he isn't getting a single dime. If we circle back to Michael, his interest within the cars was never to get paid like Trevor and Franklin, but rather securing a place at Richards' majestic movie studio and working alongside his idol Solomon Richards. As Michael began to invest more time at the movie studio and become closer to Solomon, Trevor and Franklin would go on to complete the delivery of all 5 vehicles with no form of payments, prompting Franklin to ask Michael after saving him from the Chinese thanks to his and Trevor's failed meetup in North Yankton, and this is what Michael's own words on the matter was.
Okay, well, if you don't want to talk about that, how about Devin Weston?
Weston? What about it?
We delivered the last of them cars, only he ain't paid us yet. Says he gonna invest the fucking money.
Well, he's a clever guy. You know, that might not be such a bad idea.
Are you fucking serious?
Look, Franklin, you're gonna get your money, okay? From the sounds of it, you'll even get some interest, too. And I got this other deal with Weston down at the film studio. So we gotta wait for that to play out before I got any leverage over your deal.
For real?
Come on, Franklin. had my feet chained to a meat hook for the last few hours. Give me some time, I'll figure it out, I promise.
Yeah, whatever.
Now, there was nothing important with the movie studio to prompt Michael to say anything about having to wait and see how that'll play out before he has any leverage on Devon. For one, it doesn't make any sense because Devon's had no actual presence or involvement within anything tied to the movie studio. Michael's had basically no interactions with Devon since he, Trevor, and Franklin managed to get the first 2 cars. From there, he's just been completely invested with Solomon Richard and the movie studio. A movie studio that's, again, Devin Weston actually owns. So technically speaking, he is, in a way, still working for Devin Weston, and not actually doing anything that would grant him any form of leverage in any substantial way whatsoever, especially not in whatever Trevor and Franklin are doing. Michael's more selfish nature is brought to the forefront here, as he's solely concerned about living out his dream with his idol. His comment about waiting and seeing about Devon 2 is the second time he tries to convince Franklin it's smart to just listen and follow Devon's instructions, serving as a pattern of almost pushing Franklin off of him and onto Devon. It's equally as good-hearted as it might be narcissistic. Of course, it's nothing more than Devon banking off an untapped passion of Michael's. Working alongside Solomon helped make sure Solomon's latest movie got pushed out of development hell and started going quite well, eventually hitting a point where Devon can pull the plug on the whole operation to capitalize on a very lucrative insurance policy, then using that money to get the only other major shareholder of Richard's Majestic Studio, Solomon's own son, to accept Devon's offer to tear down the entire production lot and redevelop the entire area as modern condos. Doing so in this economy would even grant the extra benefit of the city, allowing him to do so completely tax-free. And it's all thanks to Michael's passion and a certain Molly Schultz's eye in details about insurance policies. There was never any favors in it for Michael or any good-hearted attempt by Devon to see to it another cultural classic was created and released for the public to enjoy for many generations to come. Rather, he repurposed Michael's skill sets, removed the factor of cash, and allowed him to do whatever he pleased until the best chance to kick everyone back down into reality, reminding who was really in charge here, presented itself. While I'm tempted to also give him credit in splitting the 3 from each other and using the whole concept of weaponizing one's personal interests and motivations to keep the team fractured and less focused on the idea of them all being used, I think that was just more of a happy coincidence for him and not something he actually planned. Intentional or otherwise, point is he still cleverly used them, almost got what he wanted, but then was unexpectedly stopped by Michael, putting both men down a path of one of their lives eventually coming to an end. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for watching into the end of the video. Special shout out to all of the patrons who support help make these deep dives and multi-hour long videos possible. If you wish to support the channel directly and watch these videos completely ad-free, then consider joining the Patreon linked down below. If you're new, of course, consider subscribing and share who and what you would love to see covered next, both in and outside the Grand Theft Auto universe. Now, before you comment, Officer Tenpenny and CJ are coming. I just have to rerun through San Andreas, so give me a little bit of time. But of course, every suggestion is greatly appreciated.